So thank you everyone for joining for our conversation with Dr. Tracy Brower. And our topic, does the workplace still matter? I think we know that it does, and we're excited to have Tracy here. And thank you for being so generous with your time and helping out everyone on this call today understand some insights and research and your point of view on, why it matters and where we're going. And I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Moline from Steelcase to introduce our guest speaker. Lauren?
Thanks, Kyla. Hi, everybody. My name is Lauren Moline. I am a dealer business manager with Steelcase, meaning I work hand in hand with our Loth team and customers to support their needs for all things Steelcase. We wanted to thank you again for joining us today for a conversation around the future of work and why the workplace matters. I wanted to say, if you are interested in furthering any of these conversations as it relates to the future of your workplace, please reach out to myself, a Steelcase team member, or your Loth team, and we are more than happy to chat. So now I would like to introduce you.
Sorry, Lauren. I just want to mention, if everyone could put their mute on for Tracy, then we will give her undivided attention and cut down any background noises. And if you have any questions during the presentation, the chat is live, and you're welcome to add notes in there. Sorry, Lauren. Go ahead.
You're fine. Thank you, Kyla. So yeah, now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tracy Brower, PhD sociologist and principal with our Steelcase Applied Research Plus Consulting Group. Tracy studies the sociology of work and the changing nature of work, workers, and the workplace. She is also the author of Bringing Work to Life by Bringing Life to Work, as well as a contributor to Forbes and Fast Company. Not to mention, she's one of my personal favorites, and I know Kyla's too, to connect with and follow on LinkedIn. And like Kyla said, following our time today, we look forward to a Q&A session at the end, and we encourage you all to utilize that chat if you're curious about anything. And now here's to Tracy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Kyla, I think you might need to make me a presenter so I can share my screen. So if one of you doesn't mind doing that, or if you want to share your own screens, that's good too. We can go that route. So thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate it. We're looking forward to this conversation today and think that it is so important to our discussions. And so I'm just buying some time so we can get to the point that we can either share my screen or share another person's screen. That would be brilliant. Does one of you want to share your screen? Kyla, you've got the presentation as well, and Lauren, you do as well. That might not be a bad idea.
Kyla, are you okay to share that?
I am working on it. Just one moment. I'm so sorry.
That is okay. Let me just kind of start, and Kyla, when the screen comes up, we'll be in the midst of it. So we all know technology is our friend in these COVID virtual times. Technology is our friend or foe some days. So one of the things that we think is absolutely the case today is that when the paradigm shifts, everything changes. There's a wonderful quote: when the paradigm shifts, everything goes back to zero. And essentially, this is about kind of like when the car was invented. It didn't matter how great your buggy was, you weren't going to be selling a lot of buggies. And so it's just all about how the paradigm is shifting today. So just in terms of context, before we get into talking about offices, we will talk just a little bit about the paradigm and the way the paradigm is shifting. Think about, for example, the paradigm of safety and security. This is really, really interesting, right? Because there are companies that have been tiny companies that are all of a sudden going crazy in terms of their growth. And so safety and security is so important to us. So a really good example is a company that makes plexiglass was this tiny little company, and now they're going gangbusters and they can't keep up. or companies that make hand sanitizer as an example, who now can't keep up, or companies whose core competencies are literally cleaning and cleansing and disinfecting, who are now just going gangbusters in terms of their business. But the paradigm difference isn't just about companies that supply safety and security kinds of core competencies. It's also about organizations that pay attention to that. So the places where we choose to go to dinner on those rare occasions when we might go out to dinner are the restaurants that we feel are the most clean and safe. Or someday when we get back to going to the movies, oh my gosh, I can't wait for that. The theaters that we choose to go to will be the ones where we feel like there's a level of safety and security. And so that's one of the paradigm shifts that's super important. And one of the models I really like here is the Maslow model. You all learned about Maslow in high school. Maslow is that triangle model where we can look at the needs that people need to have met. And lots of us have spent our careers worrying about making sure people have a sense of belonging, making sure they have a sense of esteem, making sure they feel valued, in other words, making sure they have an opportunity to self-actualize. But as a matter of fact, a lot of us have been kind of bumped right back down to the bottom of that Maslow hierarchy. And we're worried about things like physiological needs and safety and security and safety needs. And so while we still know that we need belonging and esteem and self-actualization, those needs that might have been less prominent for us are coming up. And so I've always worked in an office that's safe and clean, but all of a sudden I'm paying lots more attention to it. So we're literally seeing companies that are choosing to have cleaning staffs work more during the day so people can see doorknobs being wiped down, as an example. We're hearing about companies who are making selections of products that are more fragrant because they want people to walk in and smell clean. Still products that are safe, of course, but more, kind of explicit in terms of the sensory experience of clean. One of the paradigms that's shifting is all about safety and security. This matters to us because it's about where we work, it's about where our customers work, and it's about the industries that we serve and the rises and falls in terms of the business winners and losers in terms of who we're serving.
Hi, Tracy.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you can just share your screen.
I would love to, but I don't have a button that allows me to do that.
Okay, at the bottom of the.
All right. Yeah, my team switched over to a new version, and I literally don't have my button that says share. It's grayed out.
I have your PowerPoint, so I'm going to bring it up in just 2 seconds.
Yay, that would be so great.
Thank you so much. Sorry, everyone.
This is like when the pilots are flying through fog and they're on autopilot, right? So we all know the plane is going to get through the air, and we may or may not be able to see out of the windshield. So it's all good. We are going to get through it together. It's kind of an analogy for life right now. So yeah, as soon as that comes up, Kyla, I'm on slide 4. So I think another of the paradigms that's really interesting for us right now is all about health, and particularly mental health, right? Like we're paying more attention to our health in all kinds of ways. We know that lots and lots of people are struggling with mental health issues. And so it's a very big deal when companies pay attention to that. So the companies that are winning, the businesses that are winning, are the ones who really, really attend to health and well-being and mental state. So actually the needs for sociology and psychology are up. The demands for telehealth are way up. Telehealth used to be somewhere around 3% of the market, and now it's like 70% of the market. So those are some of the business winners right now. Another thing that's really interesting is that relationships are coming into absolute focus. So we're with our small group of people more than ever. And so one of the things that's interesting is there are new apps for relationship counseling. So you can kind of get relationship counseling without having to leave the house or go talk to somebody. There are more divorce attorneys in demand right now. There's more family counseling in demand right now. There are more marriage licenses being granted right now, because relationships are in this really interesting kind of focus point right now. Another thing that's interesting to think about as we think about how our paradigm is shifting, how our behaviors are shifting, is all about life cycle. Any good demographer will tell you to follow life cycle as we think about who will be the business winners and losers. And so we may just see a baby boom in 6 or 9 months or so. And so companies that make cribs and diapers will be on the upswing, and then toddler toys will be on the upswing a couple years after that, and on and on. So life cycle is also something that is important to us as we think about our businesses, as we think about the businesses that we serve, as we think about which people are going back to the office and what kinds of work they're doing. Another element that's really interesting as we think about shifting paradigms is all about the experience of home. We are hearing about so many growth industries that are related to, oops, we've got a little echo. I think that might be echoing me. So if you don't mind muting, awesome, thank you. Another of the growth industries is going to be really all about the experience of home. So we're home more, so we tend to look around and go, that carpeting's a little more worn than I remember. We might need new carpeting, or hey, honey, we should put that deck on that we've been talking about. So there's lots of increase in home improvement activities. We're also seeing increases in businesses that just give us supplies. Like we're using the coffee maker at home a whole bunch more because we're not using the coffee maker in the office. So there's just more wear and tear, and we're using more supplies at home than we would have when we were out and about. So it's another interesting paradigm. Another one is all about the paradigm of receiving rather than retrieving. So we used to go out and go shopping, go out into the club to work out, go out to dinner. And now we're seeing the rise of like Uber Eats, or we're seeing the rise of delivery services. We're seeing the rise of people who are doing shopping services. We're seeing a rise in all the things that are being delivered to our homes. So that paradigm is shifting in terms of work that we're doing, the kind of work that we're doing, and who's employed and which businesses are going crazy. And entertainment's the last one I'll mention. This is super interesting. You think about the topic of kind of sins, if you will. So we've got in the United States, you all know, we have something called a sin tax on things like alcohol or cigarettes. And so those sales have gone up a lot in terms of alcohol and cigarettes. We're seeing increases in online gambling. Actually, bicycle sales are higher than they've ever been. Electronic bicycle sales are higher than they've ever been. People are buying more puzzles than ever. So the reason this is important to us is because this is the context within which we are doing our work. This is the context within which we think about the office, within which we think about our own behavior, and within which we think about the behavior of employees who may or may not be going back to offices. So we like to use that as a starting point. How's it going, Kyla, in terms of sharing? Any progress there? Anything we can do?
I'm so sorry. The link won't let me access because of a Steelcase access point.
Oh, okay.
Kyla, I just sent it to you in the PDF.
Okay, so I will bring it up that way. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out.
We are all good. We're on our airplane flying through the fog, and as long as everybody has some peanuts and I don't know, like a soda, you'll be okay, right? We are all more resilient than we've ever been, and we get through tough times together. So this is one of those. We're going to make it through. All right, way cool. So as we think about the paradigm shifting, I think the other thing we can really think about is how this will be the most significant reinvention of work in our experience. This is a really big deal. We can come back brilliantly from the coronavirus. We can come back brilliantly from the pandemic, and we will respond. But our opportunity is to really think about reinventing, reimagining. I think that we can take a really optimistic viewpoint and think about how we use the situation as an accelerant to where we might be able to go. Hooray, we have slides. It's so exciting when the technology works. We can go to slide 6, Kyla. Thank you. So one of the things that is really interesting is that you may be in a situation where you see that there'll be less reinvention of work, depending on your industry, depending on your role, depending on your particular region, you may see more or less reinvention. But if we look at a meta level, if we look at really overall analysis, this is going to be a very significant reinvention of work. And that gives us a great opportunity. And one of the things that we talk about a lot in this industry is the need to kind of get on the radar screens of senior decision makers, get on the radar screens of senior C-suite executives who are writing checks and making all of the decisions kind of at the end of the day. And workplace and culture are more on their radar screens than ever before. So this is our moment. Workplace is having a moment, work experience is having a moment, and we can absolutely benefit from that. So if we go back one slide, Kyla, to slide 5, what we'd love to do is give you all the opportunity to weigh in on how big you think the change is going to be. I've already tipped my cards and let you know that I think it's going to be a really big deal, but you may see that differently. So take a look at the question on the slide. If you click on the chat box, it's either in the lower middle of your screen or the upper part of your screen, depending on which version of Teams you have at this moment, and just type in the chat an A, B, C, or D. So question for you is, how significant do you expect the changes in the work experience to be? A, sweeping, things will never be the same. B, moderate, things will be different, but they may not be too overwhelming. C, insignificant, things will be crazy for a while, but then they will pretty much get back to normal. Or D, I'm not sure. Things seem to be changing daily, and we're in the midst of one of those moments today. So go ahead, if you don't mind, and put those in the chat. That would be brilliant. And Lauren, I think you were going to be Vanna on this one. Could you let us know what's the preponderance of answers that you're seeing? Nothing too scientific, just give us a preponderance.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like the majority is saying B in this one. So moderate. Things will be different, but it may not be too overwhelming.
Brilliant.
So we have a few C's.
Good. Good. All right, so lots of B's and some C's as well. Love it. Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's also really interesting to reflect for yourselves on where you might have been a couple of months ago and where you are now, because I think we're having this kind of ebb and flow in terms of what we anticipate. So I don't know if any of you spend time on boats. I live in Michigan, which is surrounded on 3 sides by water, so we spend lots of time on boats around here. And one of the really interesting things that happens is that, you know, you go out on a boat for the day and you have really not done that much, right? You've had a lovely day on the water, you've been in the sun, you've been sitting and snacking and having lovely time with friends, and you get back at the end of the day and you're just exhausted. And you say to yourself, why am I so exhausted? The reason is that physically you are constantly acclimating. You're constantly getting re-equilibrium because the boat's constantly moving. So even if you're sitting on the boat, you're constantly re-acclimating at some level. I think that's what we're going through this pandemic as well. This is tiring, it's exhausting, and our perspectives change regularly because we're always having to reacclimate. You just think one thing is happening and things change again. You just think you're getting a sense of equilibrium on another thing and things change again. And so all of this is causing us to really be resilient and causing us to think really hard about kind of that reacclimation. So we can go to the next slide, Kyla, on slide 7. One of the things that we've been doing is broad research. So super exciting. We've talked to literally 331 groups of people in roundtables around the world. We've talked to customers and influencers and partners and have listened to tons and tons of voices. So we've done some deep dive learning on home office experiences. We've done some deep dive learning on pandemic, and we'll share some of that with you as well. The other thing that we're pretty excited about is we have partnered with MIT with an expert on pathogen spread. And we're literally looking at how is the office configured, how are the applications and settings configured in a way that helps us understand pathogen spread. So we will be sharing that as we learn more, and we will share in the meantime some of the other research that we've got. So we can go to the next slide, Kyla. One of the things we also know is that working from home is here to stay. Literally every customer we have talked to says working from home is here to stay. Some customers say, you know what, it's going to be a tiny percentage of people who are working from home. Mostly will be back to the office. Other people say, you know what, this is working pretty darn well. We're going to continue working from home a great percentage of the time. What we know is that everyone is expecting an expanded ecosystem where there will likely be home as an element of it, big or small, hubs as an element, big or small, and some companies are also saying they're expecting satellites or spokes where people may come to a hub in order to generate and co-create and build collaboration and community. Maybe they'll go to a spoke location if they need to focus, and that's hard to do in their home office. And so companies are thinking really hard about the purposes for those elements of the ecosystem. But bottom line, we're anticipating that this won't be an either or, that this will be about home offices continuing at some level, but definitely the office itself really needing to play a very significant role. And we can go to the next slide. So we will share some research-based perspectives on that, and we can send you some follow-up information as well. We can go to the next slide, Kyla. So innovation is one of the main reasons that the office will not go away. In this expanded ecosystem that I was talking about, the office has to be a part of it. And one of the reasons is innovation. What we know about innovation is the best innovation often comes from the edges. Often the most brilliant, new, novel, unexpected ideas are not coming from people who are super steeped in the discipline. Absolutely, experts have great ideas, but a lot of times that really crazy novel idea that shifts things is coming from someone outside. When we're in offices, we have a unique opportunity to connect with people who are outside of our work area, outside of our team, outside of our project group. So innovation is a really big part of being in the office together. The other thing that we know about the way innovation works is that innovation typically comes from connecting disparate ideas. So what that means is that I run into somebody in the work cafe and they say something interesting, and I run into somebody else and we have a completely different conversation in the elevator lobby. And then I go to my project meeting and something else comes up and I put those disparate ideas together in a new way, and I've got a new idea. The office is uniquely suited to bring different disparate ideas together. The other thing the office is uniquely suited for is the fast flow of information. We get into a project room and we're brainstorming together and we jump on each other's ideas and we constructively interrupt each other now and then, and we're elbow to elbow kind of at a whiteboard with post-it notes, and we're coming up with ideas together. We may be doing that in a socially distanced way. We may be doing that with masks on in the short term, but it's a very big deal that we can come together and have that fast flow of information. We don't have the lag of technology. We don't have that person who's on mute and you're saying, hey, so-and-so, you're on mute. We don't have that crazy thing where the presentation isn't shared effectively because the technology isn't cooperating with us. There is something about being together unmitigated by technology that is a very powerful thing. And so that's the other reason that the office absolutely cannot go away, is we need the speed and the flow of information that comes through innovation that occurs in the office. We can do it virtually. We're doing it virtually. We can succeed virtually, and we need to continue that. But the office also has a really important role to play. And we can go to the next slide, Kyla. So here's a question for you, same deal, put your answer in the chat if you don't mind. To what extent do you expect shifts in the way your company adds value to the market? So thinking about your company's innovation. A, massively, you expect lots of shifts. The pandemic has brought about a reboot and a reimagining of our business. B, moderately, some of what we do will change, but overall, we're still delivering value that's relevant to the times. C, minimally, we're continuing to deliver on our fundamental value equations without tremendous change. Or D, I have no idea, but I'll keep thinking about it. So go ahead if you don't mind and click on that chat again. And just add your A, B, C, or D. Let us know what some of your thoughts are on this one and where you come in. To what extent do you expect shifts in the way your company will add value to the market? I love this question because I think it's all about how our companies innovate and how they respond. This is back to that early idea we were talking about. When the paradigm shifts, everyone goes back to zero. And the paradigm today has so shifted in terms of our behavior, in terms of what the market is demanding, in terms of how our companies need to respond. So Lauren, how are we looking? What kinds of things are you seeing mostly?
Okay, so we have mostly Bs. Moderately, some of what we do will change, but overall, we are still delivering value relevant to the times.
Awesome, sounds good. Yeah, Lauren, just curious, anybody have a C on that one? You don't have to say the name, just curious if anybody said C.
Actually, oh yes, we do have one C,
Okay.
And there is one A.
Okay, brilliant. Sounds good. Yeah, I think this one's so interesting, and it would be great when we get to Q&A, if you feel like sharing, it would be great to hear from the C's and the A's as well. It's a rare company today who isn't making some changes in their business model, in their hiring, in their responses to the market. I think a lot of times, you know how the Gretzky quote, the hockey player, Gretzky used to say he skates to where the puck is going to be, and that's why he was such a great hockey player. I think that sometimes if we're seeing less innovation from our companies, maybe it's because we were already there. We've already skated to where the puck is. But yeah, it's really an unusual company who isn't at least moderately changing, and lots of companies are just changing massively. And innovation is one of those things that comes from being in the office. One other thing to say about innovation. In 2008, 2009-ish, we saw lots of companies send people home. The reason is that the economy went off the tracks very significantly, and companies were looking to save cost. About a year later, lots of those very high-profile companies brought everybody back. They brought people back because they said they couldn't be innovative enough, they were losing people and they were having brain drain, and they weren't able to respond as effectively to the marketplace. So innovation is a really big deal in terms of being together in an office. And we can go to the next slide, Kyla. Another reason that the office won't go away and that we know the office is absolutely critical has everything to do with talent and engagement. One of the things we know statistically is the more you work from home, the more likely you are to have a side hustle. The more likely you are to have a side hustle, the more likely you are to ultimately leave your organization. Another element of brain drain is multitasking. Like, we know sometimes we're not super well behaved if we're together in a meeting room and we might see people multitasking, or we might be multitasking ourselves if we're brutally honest. But when people are working from home, they're more likely to be multitasking. They might be, I don't know, folding laundry during the project team meeting, or working on their emails during the project meeting. And so those are things that cause brain drain. The other thing that is a concern from a talent standpoint is the information that talent might share. 84% of IT leaders are concerned about security issues. People statistically are more likely to fall victim to phishing schemes. They're more likely to share information they shouldn't be sharing. They're more likely to be potentially getting through firewalls or letting things through firewalls when they're in their home offices. The other thing that's a big deal here is all about social capital. Social capital is about those critical relationships that we have with each other in the office, that we have with each other, even if we're not in the office, with people that we work. And so this is about the fabric of the organization. People that we have relationships with give us new ideas. They help us grow and stretch. They might be critical network for that next opportunity within our company. They help us make decisions, because when we're faced with a discernment or a decision or a judgment call that we need to make, we reach out to our network and we ask for their input. Or if we need to get something done, we know who to call to get that done. Social capital is significantly more built when we are face to face. We run into people in the work cafe, and there is an efficiency in building those relationships. There's also the factor about how we maintain connections with not just our primary network, but our secondary network and our tertiary network. So think about the people that you relate to on your kind of virtual world in the last 3 or 4 months are the people that you work closely with. You may have lost contact with the people that you used to kind of see in the work cafe, but you don't see so much anymore. And there's an efficiency factor. So when I'm in the office, I can go to the coffee machine and I can run into Loanne and Keith and Amalia and Lauren all at the same time. And it takes 5 minutes and we catch up and we check in and we are feeling connected with each other. But those are not the same people that I would reach out and set up a conference call with, because it's not that formal and we don't need to spend that much time. And so social capital is significantly more built when we're in the office together, in our primary networks, but also in our secondary and our tertiary networks. The other thing that's interesting here is statistically, your next job opportunity will come from your secondary or your tertiary network. I just wrote an article on this in Fast Company talking about networking and kind of how to get your next role and your next opportunity. And those secondary and tertiary networks are especially important because those are people who have access to networks that we don't. They have access to information about that next career, and they can help us grow and stretch even within our own organization. So another reason that the office cannot go away has everything to do with social capital and talent and engagement. And we go to the next slide. Another thing that's super related here is attraction and retention. If you think of culture as an iceberg and there's kind of the water level, under the water level are the norms and assumptions and values that are critical and palpable, but not explicit. You can't see them really easily. Above the water level are the elements of place. Place is the most visible artifact of culture. And one of the things that's happening right now is we don't have that aspect as much in order to communicate to us about what we value and how we value collaboration and the extent to which we value well-being, the extent to which we're connected with our community. And so one of the things we also know is that people come to the office, not just for the tools and technology in the office, but for the people in the office. And one of the things we're hearing from customers right now is that as we slowly start to get back to the office, it's kind of weird because it might be there are less people there. And the reason I came to the office in the first place was to try to connect with my people. And if my people aren't there, then that isn't the same attraction that it used to be. So one of the things we're hearing is that clients and teams are saying that they're formalizing their thinking about when they're going to come back to the office. They're coordinating with each other to say, hey, let's be there on Tuesday because the reason I'm there is you, and let's make it Tuesday so we're all there together. I think the other thing that's relevant here is the idea of the behaviors and norms. When you aren't in the office with others, you can't kind of check in with people. You can't check in with your leader walking through the space or kind of look up and look around to your teammates to kind of check in with them. And so we are attracted by people. We are retained when we have great relationships with others. The number one reason that people stay with an organization is because they have a best friend at work. There's a book called Vital Friends by Tom Rath that makes that point. And so that is one of the things that is really, really critical about why the office cannot go away. It is about our relationships with other people. And we go to the next slide. Here's a question for you. Same deal. Put your answer in the chat if you don't mind. To what extent do you believe the work experience is part of attracting and retaining people? A, significantly, people pay attention to the work experience for sure. B, somewhat, it's important, but people may not realize it fully. C, not so much, I think it's about other things. Or D, I'll have to tell you more offline. I think this one's a super interesting one because a lot of times we're talking to each other. We're the ones who are creating work experiences. And some of the people we talk to say, oh my gosh, we're brilliant at it. We do it really well. We're expert. Others say, you know, we're the cobbler's children. Sometimes we don't have our own shoes, even though we're the children of the cobbler. So it's interesting to hear how you all feel about attraction and retention and how important you feel like the work experience is to it. Lauren, how are we doing on this one? What are you mostly seeing?
We have an overwhelming number of A's on this one. There's no outliers, so it's pretty interesting.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we are all in the right place together. Yeah, I think so. This is super interesting because a lot of organizations have a certain expectation that they set with people, right? Like their brand and their employee value equation, what they offer to people is setting a certain expectation. And then when people come in, their experience may vary based on that expectation. So if your expectation was really high based on employee value equation and value expectations, and your experience is lower than that, you'll tend to be dissatisfied. If your expectation is lower and your experience is higher, you'll tend to be more satisfied. So the key here as well is to create that alignment. I just wrote an article about how on earth we onboard people when we're in the middle of a pandemic and when they can't come to the office to meet their colleagues, to meet their leader, to get a sense for the organization. And we just have to be so much more intentional about making those connections happen and communicating our culture through areas that aren't necessarily place-based. But as we get back to our offices, that will be really, really helpful as well in terms of attraction and in terms of retention. And we can go to the next slide. Another reason that the office absolutely cannot go away has everything to do with purpose. Harvard has studied purpose significantly. And one of the things that we know is when organizations have a common purpose, they're significantly more likely to be more successful. That is just one of the things that unifies us and brings us together. SHRM did a wonderful study, Society for Human Resource Management, and they found that 65% of executives said they were really struggling with morale. People were kind of floundering, like even though they knew what their job was, they weren't feeling this unified sense of purpose in the same way. There is something about showing up together in the same place. You walk into the parking lot or walk into the building through the parking lot with somebody and you may not know them well, but you're showing up together to do something. You see somebody across the coffee bar and you may not know them well. You may not work with them closely, but you're showing up together to do something together. And that unified purpose is a very big deal in terms of people feeling good about their work. Purpose, if you think about the personal experience of purpose, purpose is about three things. Number one, purpose is about feeling like I'm connected to something bigger than myself. Number two, purpose is about feeling like I can make a difference in that thing personally, like there's some unique contribution that I can make. And number three, purpose always has to do with people. I can sign up as a good corporate citizen for 15% annualized growth, but the thing that will really get me out of bed in the morning is knowing that that has something to do with a person. So I might be working on an assembly line, assembling a widget, but it matters to me that the widget goes into a crank and the crank goes onto a hospital bed and that crank is used to turn the patient so that they don't get bed sores and gangrene and they can go home someday. I may work for a company that does fixtures like doorknobs or hooks, and that may not seem super important, but I know it has to do with aesthetics, and I know that aesthetics are critical to the human condition and us appreciating what's around us. So purpose is important at an individual level. Purpose is important organizationally, so we feel like we've got this unified sense of what we're doing. And it has everything to do with line of sight that is both figurative and literal. Figuratively, line of sight is about I'm working on something and it goes to you and then to her and then to him and then it goes to the customer. And that line of sight matters. I have a sense of business literacy about how my work connects. Line of sight is also literal in terms of being able to look across the work environment and say, I need to connect with so-and-so, or boy, I feel pretty good about the work that we're doing today. We're making a difference in the marketplace because we're here together. So purpose is another reason that the office cannot go away. And we can go to the next slide, Kyla, sorry. Energy is another really, really big one. We need to come together. And one of the things that happens, sociologically speaking, the bandwagon effect is where we draw energy from other people. The more people come together, the more we tend to get energy from them. So think about if you're in a town hall meeting, even if you're part of a relatively small organization, you might have 20 people gathered for your town hall. Maybe you've got a few hundred gathered for your town hall. There's an organization in Madison, Wisconsin, where they've got 10,000 employees under one set of roofs on a campus, and they've got one area where they can bring everybody together. That is a great example of the bandwagon effect. So when we're together with other people, even if it's a reasonably smaller group, we feel the energy from that group. We tend to feel the emotions from that group. We tend to react together as a group, and that creates common purpose. It also is really important for communication density. Communication density is when more people have more information more immediately, and we've got tons of transparency. That helps any organization make decisions more quickly because people are in the loop, make better decisions because people have the information they need. And so when we're together in space, even if we might have like a town hall in one city connected virtually to a town hall in another, connect virtually to another country, we've got that kind of coming together and hearing the same message at the same time. I've got a brilliant colleague who says, you know, since being sent home, we can't hear the birds chirping. Oh, I love this. When you watch a disaster movie, right? Maybe you like dystopian movies, maybe you watch the movie about the tsunami. As the tsunami is about to hit, all of a sudden everything is silent. The birds stop chirping and the wildlife escapes to higher ground because intuitively they know they need to. The office is like that because we can hear the birds chirping figuratively, right? Like we hear the conversation in the elevator lobby. We hear the conversation that's happening before our meeting begins. We overhear or we check in with somebody at the coffee bar. That is the idea of hearing the birds chirping. You just have a sense for what's going on, and that is a really good thing for people feeling a sense of engagement and a sense of energy together. And so when we're home, we can work successfully virtually. We've got to make sure that we're intentionally checking in with each other. And one of the reasons the office simply cannot go away is because of this energy factor. And we can go to the next slide, Kyla. Humanity is another really critical one. I love this point. This is such a big deal. Connection is critical to our health. We know that when we are not face-to-face connected with people, person-to-person connected with people, we have greater levels of morbidity and greater levels of mortality. We need each other. Our instinct is to come together in groups. We are herd animals, we're tribe animals, and when we sense threat or danger, we come together because we know there's strength in numbers. This has been introducing cognitive dissonance because we haven't had the ability to come together in numbers. The example I love here, we were in Roatan on vacation a couple of years ago. Someday we'll all go on vacations again, and Roatan would be a great place to go. I was with my husband and our son, and they were doing this nighttime snorkel. And the guide was saying, well, we may see some sharks during this nighttime snorkel, which of course I was thrilled to hear about. So he handed everybody a tin can with some coins in it, and the instruction was, if you see a shark, you should shake your tin can with coins. And I thought, oh God, that sounds like really a great solution to a shark. But the other thing he said, which was great, was if we see a shark, we all want to swim close together, because the shark will mistake us for a larger animal rather than seeing us as, individual prey potentially. And that is the human condition. We come together in groups in order to feel safe. And the office is a really important way we come together. The office offers us the opportunity for social and rejuvenation and learning. Work is fundamentally social, whether we're introverts or extroverts. We all need time alone and all need time together, just in different proportions. And so the office gives us that opportunity for our humanity. We are struggling with social isolation. We are struggling with mental health issues, and partly that is because we've been more isolated. The other thing to mention here is a neuroscience concept. When we are together with other people, person to person, we get a hit of oxytocin. Oxytocin is a brain chemical that helps us feel happy, helps us feel more satisfied, and helps us feel a greater sense of togetherness and belonging. The thing that's important about that is the more oxytocin we have, the less we have adrenocorticotropin. Adrenocorticotropin is a brain chemical that causes the release of adrenaline and cortisol. Those things are good if we're running away from a predator, but if they are released too much over time, they can cause lots of health issues. So oxytocin helps dampen the effects of adrenocorticotropin, and it literally helps us stay healthier. So we need to be together for our health and well-being at a physical, at a cognitive, and an emotional level. And we can go to the next slide. Empathy is also a really big deal. We want to get in sync. I know this is going to sound a little woo-woo, but we need to get into limbic resonance. Limbic resonance is the brain process where we want to be in sync with others in terms of nonverbal communication, in terms of the energy that we're exchanging, in terms of feeling like we understand each other. That connection point is really important, and it's important to our mental health. And we can go to the next slide. So here's a question for you. I've set you up for this one a little bit, but I know you may think differently, so it's nice to check in with you. What do you believe people miss most about the office? A, other people. B, the technology. C, getting out of the house. D, something else. Or E, not a lot, honestly. So go ahead and weigh in on this one if you don't mind. What do you think people miss? You know, one of the things we haven't talked a lot about is this idea of getting out of the house. You know, we can work at home, we can eat at home, we can work out at home, we can shop at home, we can socialize at home, but just because we can doesn't mean we should. There is a whole lot of benefit in the variety of getting out for different kinds of reasons. So I think that one's a really big deal. Lauren, what are we seeing mostly on this one?
So we have mostly A's. I do see an E, also a C on this one.
Okay, good. Yeah, that getting out of the house is a big deal. E is interesting, right? Like, I think it's been really interesting to see some of the memes where people say, you know, if I didn't have to change my lifestyle very much for the quarantine, I guess I was pretty happy being on my own. And I think that's super fair. One of my more introverted colleagues said, you know, this quarantine is really hard because my team wants to have all these Zoom happy hours, and I don't have excuses anymore to say, oh, I'm going to be away, or I'm traveling, or I have other things where I'm out and I can't be home for. And so that's been really interesting. I think we're all in really different places, and some of us have great home office setups, and that helps a lot. So what we miss about the office will be unique to us, and we know that other people are a really big part of what we want in the office. We want that sense of belonging, back to Maslow. And we can go to the next slide. So variety and movement is also a really big reason that the office cannot go away. This seems like a no-brainer, and it's actually not. One of the things we know neuroscientifically is that our brains are incredibly bored. We evolved over millennia on the savannah. We were fighting off predators, and we were watching for prey, and we were protecting our families, and we were finding shelter. And now, or at least we used to, we show up in business casual attire and we have polite meetings with our colleagues. Even if we're showing up in front of a video screen, our brains are incredibly bored. We need the variety. We need the stimulation of getting out. Movement is so healthy for our physical well-being. Also, movement helps cement learning. Like, if you learn something and then move, you are more likely to remember it. So think about being in a meeting and then moving to another meeting room, or having a conversation and then moving to another part of the campus. That movement is really helpful, and you can create that movement for yourself at home, of course, as well. The other thing that's interesting here is all about memory. Memory is often based on place. Like, there's a dynamic that's happening right now called temporal disintegration. That is the dynamic that means that you don't know what day it is, and I can't remember it either. We're all in this weird, like, twilight zone. That is temporal integration. And one of the reasons it occurs is that our physical environment isn't shifting enough to give us different memories. I can't remember the conversation I had with you yesterday because I didn't remember that it was in the work cafe. Or if you're in a meeting room, you can look at a whiteboard and remember that pink Post-it note on the upper right that we all kind of resonated with that idea. Or I remember that interesting conversation I had with you when we were in meeting room 6. Those are the reasons that memory tends to cement in space, is that there's a spatial element in our brain as well. And so when we're kind of in the same place all the time, having different conversations, it can be harder to remember, and we experience this temporal disintegration or this time compression. And we go to the next slide. The other thing that's really interesting here is all about boundaries. You know, in the work-life literature, we've spent tons of time thinking about boundaries. How do we leave work behind? How do we maintain a boundary with work? How do we maintain a focus on our personal life? Work is part of a full life, and that is all good, but a little boundary is also a good thing. Lately, we've been hearing the opposite. People are saying, oh my gosh, I love my people, but my group is really small and I'd love a little distance. Maybe I'd like a little distance from the laundry that I know needs to be folded, or I'd like a little distance from that tiff that I had with my partner this morning, or that difficult conversation I had with my child. That distance can be a good thing. And there is something about the rhythm and pattern of getting out of the house that is also helpful in terms of setting that boundary. I get in my car, or I get on my mass transit, or I walk to my office each day. I walk in at about 8:30 on Mondays, and about 8:30 on Tuesdays, and about 8:30 on Wednesdays. That pattern and rhythm to life is really helpful, and that separation is helpful as well. There'll always be integration with work and life, and we'll have different preferences for how much that's integrated, but a little bit of boundary can be a really good thing. And we can go to the next slide. Finally, culture is absolutely critical. We've started talking a little bit about this before, but culture is having to do really hard work. If culture is quote unquote how things get done around here, or quote unquote what people do when no one's looking, when we sent everybody home, culture had to be true north. I couldn't ask a lot of questions kind of day to day and minute to minute of my colleagues. And we know that distance can be detrimental. Physical space can result in more psychological distance. Physical distance can result in more psychological distance. We may have less familiarity with the people around us because we're just not checking in with them as much about what's going on in their lives. We may feel like we're not as connected in terms of what's generally going on in the organization. And the company can use the place to send messages about culture, what we value, how things get done around here. And when that element of messaging is shut off until we're back post-vaccine or even pre-vaccine, that will be a really important way that we bring culture back in. So culture needs to be managed so intentionally when we can't be in the physical space. The physical space, as I said, is the most visible artifact of culture. And so culture continues to be critical, and the place ends up being a really important reason that culture is fostered, that it's stimulated, that it's catalyzed, and that it's sustained. And this is where we started as well. The culture is so on the radar screens of senior executives. How do we maintain our culture if we don't have people together? And the work experience is so much on the minds of senior executives and C-suite executives because we realize the connection between these two. So it's super powerful stuff. And we can go to the next slide. So we think there are new elements of choice and flexibility, giving people individual choice, having flexibility in the physical space so we can deal with business continuity going forward. And we can go to the next slide. And we know there are spatial implications. We've got to allow for the individual within the collaborative. We've got to make sure that digital and physical are connected and that we have this expanded ecosystem of space that allows for all kinds of work in all kinds of places, including the office. And we can go to the next slide. So this is important to take action on now because, and we can go to the next slide as I'm talking, because sometimes there's a risk of inaction. If we kind of put everything on pause and decide we're not going to take action in terms of improving our offices, renewing our offices, that can get us into a place where we don't have as much time to take important action and we don't have as much time to learn deeply. So with that, let me be quiet and see what kinds of questions you have. We are absolutely convinced that the office does still matter, and we're absolutely convinced that it will be part of an expanded ecosystem, and we're super interested in continuing to learn from you all as we go forward in that journey. So let me stop there and turn it back to you, Lauren, for any questions.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. Lots of interesting points to think about today. So we had some awesome questions in the chat, but definitely feel free to add any questions going forward, and we'll do our best to get to those. So one of them I thought was very interesting to begin with was we would love to hear your opinion on what are some of the positives that have come from the pandemic.
That's a great one. You know, I just saw some new research that lots and lots more people feel like they have a greater sense of work-life harmony, work-life, I don't like work-life balance so much, but work-life harmony, work-life integration, that's been really positive. I think we are absolutely seeing the positive aspects of stress, and we're seeing greater levels of resilience. I wrote an article about this, that stress can cause us to have new perspectives. It can cause us to stretch. It can cause us to learn new things. And so those have been some of the positives. And I've heard people say that they're feeling closer to their people. You know, like it's been really, really tough to teach my child instead of sending my child to school, but I've had tons of quality time with my child. Or it's been really tough to care for my aging elder parent that lives with us, but boy, I've been home a lot and I've appreciated that. So definitely pros and cons.
Yes, absolutely. And I know I felt that way at times too. So another question from one of our guests here, how will we as a population emerge from this pandemic? We are relationship focused, and this has certainly been a strain.
Yeah, so how will we emerge? You know, I just wrote an article on the what if generation. Like, I think we've been hearing all this, like, oh my gosh, what about the kids who are growing up through this? This is like, it's hard for all of us, but if you're forming your opinions about the world and forming your persona, this can be especially hard. I think there's reason for lots of hope in terms of how this builds relationships, how this builds resilience. And another thing that's real here is that sociologically speaking, one of the main ways that we create bonds with each other is by going through really hard times together. There's literally something called a common enemy phenomenon. When we go through really hard times, we come out on the other side and we have these deep bonds with each other. I think that's what's happening now. I think we are going to come out on the other side of this and we're going to emerge and go, oh, holy cow, that was hard, but here we are together and we've made it through. So from a relationship standpoint, I think it will be really helpful to us. We're experiencing tons of friction. We are not at our best. We are going through so much tension right now that we tend to be more triggered. But I think on the other side and through it all, we're going to be able to really, really create these new bonds with each other from a relationship perspective.
Thank you, Tracy. So another one that just came through, how will we be successful in helping culture transcend physical engagement?
Oh, that is the $6 million question. I wrote an article on that one as well. We've got to remember Lauren and Kyla to send all these. Yeah, right. Like culture is partly about my relationship with my leader. So I think leaders who are super present, accessible, and responsive. Culture is something that I experience through my team members and my connections. So I think the more we can connect people with each other, not just in terms of like Zoom happy hour, which is great, keep doing that, but not just in terms of the relationship side of it, but task. Like when people have tasks, that is a really important way that they build relationships and experience the culture, because you're always making decisions which are based on your judgments that are based on the culture. So keeping people super connected, giving people a really good sense of where the company's going and why that matters and how their work is connected to it. Those are three things that I think are really critical to building culture, even if we don't have access to the place in the same way.
That's great. Thank you, Tracy. So I know we have a few more minutes, so I'll try to get to a couple more questions. So one of them that came from one of our Steelcase team members, which I thought was really interesting, is we've seen predominant companies like Google and Facebook announce that they are extending their work from home policy until the end of the year. Do you think this is just a circumstance of the traditional period, or do you think this is a sign on the impact of COVID will have long-term flexibility with remote working?
I think it is the pendulum swinging way far, and I think the pendulum is going to come back to rest. Like I do think that there is Pre-vaccine, it's a very different world than post-vaccine. So post-vaccine, I think we'll see much more return to what we were used to, but I think we're going to see residue. I don't think it's going to be exactly like it used to be. I think it can actually be better. So in the short term, I think it's a little bit of a knee jerk. In the short term, I think we are overly optimistic about how productive we can be and how well companies can function. And I think we're absolutely going to realize that we can still function brilliantly virtually, but not 100%. And we still need to come together for some really, really important reasons.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And last one before we'll turn it over to Kyla to wrap us up. But what types of companies do you see rising from this better than before? What types of traits and behaviors do they encourage?
Oh, I love that. I think they encourage innovation. I think they encourage entrepreneurialism. This is about MacGyver times, right? You know MacGyver, action guy on TV, right? He can like build a rocket ship with a paperclip and a piece of chewing gum. That is the skill. That is the behavior at an individual level and at an organizational level, where we can figure it out. We can look around and understand our circumstance, and we can improvise, problem solve, and respond. That is the kind of behavior I think that's going to be most successful.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you again for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to have you. And we'll definitely send some of the links and articles that you talked about out following the call. So I'm going to turn it over to Kyla to close us out.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for your patience at the beginning of our session together. And thank you so much, Dr. Tracy Brower, for sharing your mind and insights with us. It was really rich and valuable for us today. And like Lauren said, we'll be following up with some links and some articles that Dr. Brower referenced earlier in the chat, along with some encouragement about reaching out. If you have an opportunity or desire to have a deeper conversation about any of the topics we covered today, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to facilitate. And thank you again, everyone, for joining, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you. Thanks, Kyla. Thanks, Loth.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.